Our next and final speaker for the morning is Sam Graves from Missouri. Representative Graves is the chairman of the very important Highways and Transit Subcommittee. He has been a leader on these issues for a number of years, and we really look forward to what he has to say. I will ask Samuel Dessou, the Deputy General Manager with the Kansas City Area Transportation Authority in Kansas City, Montana, to come to the, Missouri, sorry, to come to the stage.
Good morning. I have the pleasure of introducing our next speaker, Congressman Sam Graves. Congressman Graves is a lifelong resident of Missouri's 6th Congressional District. As a small businessman and a 6th-generation family farmer, Congressman Graves has spent his life making Missouri a better place to live, work, and raise a family. In Congress, Congressman Graves serves as the chairman of the House Subcommittee on Highways and Transit. This committee oversees the development of a national transportation policy and focuses on improving Americans' highways. As chairman, Congressman Graves continues to work on our behalf in Missouri of our 34,000 highway miles and the 10,400 bridges that are in need of maintenance and repair. Congressman Graves is also a member of the House Committee of Armed Services. Missouri has a $15 billion military footprint and plays a critical role in ensuring our troops have the resources that they need. Congressman Graves also is determined to protect Missouri's various military installations and all of the brave men and women who serve. Please join me in welcoming Congressman Sam Graves.
It is Missouri, not Montana. Long ways away. Well, it's a pleasure to be here visiting with you. Rodney kind of teed some stuff up for you. Rodney does a great job on the T&I committee. We've got a good committee. It's a pretty bipartisan committee, to be quite honest with you, too. Infrastructure and transportation infrastructure in particular tends to be an issue that we get along, and we're able to work out some really good compromises and come up with some good legislation. What I thought I'd do is tell you a little bit about where we are, what's going on in the Transportation Committee right now, a little bit about the infrastructure package that we're going to be working on. But the timeline right now for transportation, at least for the rest of the year, and this is an election year, so that kind of messes things up just a little bit. But we're going to finish or do an extension on the FAA reauthorization, get that extension done, then we're immediately going to pivot to WRDA. We're going to get a WRDA bill accomplished. We'll come back to FAA, finish up the FAA reauthorization, then we'll move into the infrastructure package. In the meantime, we're also trying to, as Rodney mentioned, trying to figure out how we keep the Highway Trust Fund solvent for a very long time to come, and I'll get into that just a little bit here in a moment. Hopefully we're going to have an omnibus package this week, a budget deal. The good news in there is we've got $20 billion worth of plus up over the next 2 years for transportation projects, so that means $10 billion this year. Some of that's going to find its way into transit systems. That's good, very good. So that's above what we're usually spending when it comes to transportation. It's kind of a down payment, I guess you might say, in terms of the infrastructure package, which the president is proposing. So you're going to see that this week. We should be voting on it this week and have it moving forward in terms of the spending package. As far as the infrastructure package goes, the president kind of threw out the $1.5 trillion figure total price tag. I don't know if we can quite get there. We're going to be shooting more for $1 trillion, which is the original proposal. He wants to put $200 billion in there as seed money. It's a very broad piece of legislation, everything from water systems and sewer systems through rural broadband, highways, transit projects, pipelines, aviation, rail, everything is in there. How we divide those dollars up is yet to be determined. How we're going to prioritize that has yet to be determined. It's really just a blueprint right now. And then we're working on, obviously, the framework and working with the president to see what priorities he wants in there and how he wants to move forward. But with that, we're also trying to figure out how to keep the trust fund solvent. Right now, we're using fuel tax. which is very regressive. We're seeing fewer and fewer dollars all the time simply because we have more and more vehicles on the road that are efficient, using natural gas, using electricity, whatever the case may be, as Rodney pointed out earlier. So we might try to do a pivot to vehicle miles traveled. It'd be fairly easy in the commercial sector. We always already have that information pretty handy. In the private sector, it's going to be a little bit harder. You can't, if you just do an odometer reading at the end of the year, it's very tough on families. You can't hit a family with a tax bill at the end of the year, one big tax bill. That's one of the neat things about the gas tax is it's on the go. You pay into it as you fuel up at the pump. So what we're looking at is doing something very similar, something that's figured right at the pump, whether that is just taking the amount of gas you use and dividing that by the gallons, and we pick that figure, whatever that may be, miles per gallon, and it's calculated right there. There's some new technology that figures that your odometer actually talks to the gas pump, figures it right there too. I think that's ultimately going to happen in the future, but maybe a little bit farther down the road. But it's fairly easy to do, and I think that that's where we pivot to. I hate to spend the political capital to see a increase in the gas tax when it's simply running out of life anyway. I think if we're going to spend the political capital, we go ahead and pivot to something different, something that's more sustainable for the long term, and then we're able to recoup those dollars from vehicles that aren't spending anything for the use of the road. So we're going through that process. We're having hearings, some pretty active hearings in terms of trying to figure out where we move forward in terms of that highway trust fund. So that's kind of where we are in a nutshell. I will point out too that the president obviously zeroed out the investment grant program. The legislature, we've always, in Congress, we've always gone ahead and funded that. You're going to see the same thing this year. We will continue to fund those grants. Very important in the transit world. So, very important in the transit world. So with that, I think we're doing a few questions, or a couple of questions anyway. If anybody has anything, I think that's what the mics are for. Is that all right? So, yes.
With us. Appreciate that. What we're hearing from other sources, of course, is that the VMT approach to raising the tax and being a substitute for the fuel tax is some number of years away, maybe as far as 10 or more years away. What's your view?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, we're going to have to do something. So everything's on the table, including tolling, which I do not like tolling. I don't like paying for something twice. But everything is on the table. And again, what I support is that VMT. We put $100 million into the last highway bill to allow states to do some pilot programs to take a look at it. And we're seeing some very good results coming out of that. Again, I hate to see us spend that political capital to try to see an increase in the fuel tax, then have to turn right back around and expend political capital to change that as those dollars continue to go down. But right now, hopefully, I don't think it's that far into the future. That's what I'm going to be working towards. I know the speaker's very interested in that, as well as the rest of the leadership on the at least on the House side. But everything's on the table, and we're kind of negotiating that as we speak and trying to figure something out.
Mr. Chairman, thanks for being here again today. We really appreciate it. Just, we're all kind of on the edges of our seat, excuse me, about the appropes bill that's going to be filed, it looks like, by midnight tonight. Are you hearing anything in there on any of this stuff that you can talk about?
We haven't seen a whole lot coming out. We just hear, so far we've heard, obviously rumors and some assurances. Haven't seen anything, but we do know there's going to be $20 million in there over the next 2 years for transportation. That's a plus up. Right. That's more than we usually spend, and that's going to be divided throughout. So everybody's going to get a little bit of piece of that, which is going to include transit. So
mostly going to transit and highways, I think, right?
It'd be all right with me.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Good morning, Mr. Congressman.
morning.
Thank you for being here. One of the questions that I had in looking at the infrastructure proposals, and you mentioned the CIG and Congress trying to keep at least part of that in place. Can you speak to any of the other programs for potential funding, Tiger grants. What about the New Starts programs? Are any of those being discussed and enhanced?
The way the money's going to be divided out, the plus up that we're going to get is going to be divided amongst everything. But everything is still in there. Everything's intact as far as Tiger grants or any of the other programs we have. Nothing's been zeroed out in this budget bill that was authorized by the committee in the last highway bill. So,
Thank you, sir.
yes, sir.
Thank you for being here. I come from Texas,
Uh-huh.
and do you think there's room for red states to do local state VMT action while you're working it out at the federal level?
Is there room for it? Yes. And in fact, I think Oregon already does a VMT on their own authority, at least for their state portion. But there's absolutely opportunity there and an opening. So, but that would obviously be up to the states and how they want to proceed forward with that. So, I would venture to say if the federal government moves towards a VMT, most states are going to want to keep it as simple as possible and move in that direction as well. That didn't mean all of them will. Some of them may continue to use gas tax or fuel tax as their funding mechanism, but that's up to the states. Hey, Ray.
I think we have a general consensus of this group that one of the great things in the FAST Act was the rail title. So
Yep.
the first time we're there, I think we would like to hold on to that concept going forward and perhaps expand it.
Well, you know my feelings on that, and I would like to see it expanded. Obviously, more and more interest in rail transit and more and more usage all the time, particularly in those high capacity areas. So I think you're going to continue to see that more and more enhanced and more private opportunities as well. Thanks, everybody. I hope you enjoy your time in D.C. So.